Hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. I hope you are having an absolutely phenomenal day today. And today we're going to discuss the importance of following your intuition and never giving up. We all have that temptation and the urge to, step back a little bit when things start to get tough and it gets challenging. We let the fear override what's actually happening in the present moment. We don't listen to our intuition. It's the self-doubt that kicks in overdrive sometimes. And it's really important to step beyond that, to know that whatever it is in life, your goals that you're pursuing, your dreams, your passions, you want to stay strong and continue to pursue them, even though things get a little bit tough. We're all here on this planet. We're learning. We are all lifelong learners as far as I'm concerned, but we need to be open to the lessons. So I think it's really important to do that. So coming up in this hour, you're going to hear from a woman who was absolutely determined to find her biological father. So she set out on a mission. It took some time, but she was determined, even though she hit a brick wall, even though she was met with challenges, she continued. She kept her resolve strong in her pursuit, and it led to finding a family that she didn't even know existed. So again, it's such a great, beautiful story of staying true to yourself, following your intuition and what feels right to you. So I just want to jump into the conversation and welcome Jennifer Knight, a friend of mine who I've known for many years. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the show, Jennifer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, what a great introduction. You're already bringing tears to my eyes.
Oh, well, listen, you're going to bring a lot of tears, I think, to a lot of people when they hear your story and your determination and just, the ending. Because oftentimes, we're stuck in this mystery world and we don't know what's going to happen, and so you found yourself in that situation. So I want to go back in time. So as a child growing up, you never knew your biological father, and there was this mystery surrounding that. So what was that like for you, and when did you know that you wanted to find answers and you really wanted to find out who this man was?
So as far back as I can remember, my stepdad's always been there. And I think when I was younger, he was somewhat accepting of me. But then my brother came along. I have a half brother. And when he came along, he was the apple of my stepdad's eye. It was his son. It was his flesh and blood. And I think that things kind of started to change. And I was 7. And I was at the age where I started to recognize that there were some differences. There was a little bit of favoritism that happened. And my stepdad had sat me down. And I want to say it was probably around the same time that my brother was born, and had said to me that, I don't know if you realize or not, but I'm not your natural father. And I knew, but I don't think I necessarily really knew exactly what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I kind of started thinking about it, and of course, when you're 7, like, what do you really know?
Yeah.
But started thinking about it and kind of asking my mother some questions, and then having, I guess, family. And you kind of hear like your older aunts and uncles talking, and conversations were had that, Jennifer's not his, and the conversations kind of continue that. And you were always that little kid that would kind of like listen as the conversations were happening. And then I started to feel like, okay, if he's really not my natural father, and what does all that mean? I guess by the time I was kind of hitting my teenage years is kind of when I really started asking a lot of questions and really wanting to know. And I was kind of pointed down a bit of a path that, of a man that my mother had dated when she was younger, and kind of thought to believe that maybe he was my father, and just kind of like shrugged it off and thought, oh, well, whatever, it is what it is.
Somebody that you knew?
I never met.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I had met his family members. Apparently, my mom was very close with his sister.
Mm-hmm.
I had spent a summer with his sister. She's got some kids that are the same age as I am, and for all intents and purposes, I've called them my cousin. I still do to this day,
Mm-hmm.
even though they're not. But never really, I don't believe I met him. And I say that because I must have been about 12 when I went out and spent a summer with them, or at least a big chunk of the summer with them out in Sudbury. And so it never really dawned on me. And I think when I came back from that trip, it's really when it hit me and started to think like, I really want to know about him. And my mom just always shut it down and, never really conversed anything more about it. And it was just kind of left. I remember talking with one of my cousins who I've been very close with. And she would always tell me, oh, this one particular aunt knew information. And so I would ask her. And she always used to say to me, Jennifer, it's not my place to say anything. And she would be very tight-lipped. And I just kind of shrugged it off and thought, oh, well, okay, well, it is what it is. And I tried making a couple of phone calls to see, how do I find out? It wasn't an adoption issue, so I couldn't call an adoption agency. I had requested the long form of my birth certificate. It didn't get me anywhere. And I kind of put it off for quite a while. And it was always one of those things that kind of ran in the back of my mind, but I never really pursued it much more than that. And I'm going to say probably picking up more after I got married and I had my kids, things really started kind of turning up for me and really wanting to know more. And I'm going to say it was about 3 years ago, around the time that Canada was celebrating 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing all these commercials on TV for Ancestry DNA. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to bite the bullet and I'm just going to do this. And so I had done my DNA, sent my DNA sample in, and I was literally sitting on the edge of my seat for those results to come in. And when they did, they showed I had a second cousin. And I was just floored. And I thought, oh my God, I've never met this person before. I have no idea who it is. But then when I started kind of digging around in there, I started realizing that it's great that I've got this second cousin here and literally more than 1,000 other potential relatives. But how do I know if they're related on my dad's side or down the road on my mom's side? And I really didn't know.
Mm-hmm. So you don't get that kind of information. It's very vague. It's just, here's a name and that's pretty much it.
Pretty much. So, and they tell you how much DNA measurements they have in common with you. So it kind of gives a bit of a rank.
Yeah.
So I had reached out to my cousin and I said, okay, here's where I'm at. And she's been with me on this journey forever. And I said, here's where I'm at. I've got all these cousins in here and I don't know who's on my mom's side and who's on my dad's side. And the only way that I can really narrow it down is if I had somebody on either side that can help me to relate. So I bought her a kit and said, I need you to do this for me.
Wow.
Because if they're related to you and they're related to me, then that means they're on my mom's side. And if they're not related to you, then I can start narrowing things down on my dad's side.
Some good detective work, narrowing it down and trying to fill in the gaps.
And that's really what it was. So she did her DNA for me. And I was able to determine that one second cousin that came up is actually on my dad's side. And interestingly enough, she had put her DNA in because she was adopted and was looking for her adoptive family. And to this day, she hasn't really been able to find very much. I did have another cousin that was on there, and I'm going to say she's probably like a third or a fourth cousin that had a lot of information about her family. She has a very large family tree on her profile. And she was fantastic at sharing information with me. And I really got to say, without her, I probably wouldn't be as far as I am.
So how did you get connected with her? You picked up the phone, searched her name. How did that happen?
So when you have similar contacts or relatives or such on your DNA, if they're open to connecting, like you can actually click on their name, similarly like how you would on any other social media. You can click on their name and you can actually send them a message. And so I sent her a message and just said, I think the subject line was family, ? And so I sent her a message, something along the lines of, hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm looking for some information about my family. It looks like you and I have some really, a lot of family that's in common. And I'm really wondering if you can kind of help me figure out where some things are at. And so her and I had a couple of email conversations back and forth. We ended up exchanging phone numbers because it just got to be too detailed, where we ended up picking up the phone and talking. And when we realized that we were fourth cousins, we'll say, we determined that if you're fourth cousins, then you have 3 times your great grandparents that are similar. And like how I did, having my cousin do her DNA to determine who was on my mom's side, who was on my dad's side, the system will tell you who you have in common. So she went into her family side to see who she had in common with me, and was able to determine that I was related to her on her mother's side.
Wow. So when you started to get this information, first it started off, with the cousins, and now more information on your cousin's, your fourth cousin's mother's side or what have you. What was the feeling? How were you feeling throughout this process? Were you nervous, scared, excited, wanting to know, not wanting to know? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think I was feeling all of that. I was feeling a little anxious, thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And I've now started to unturn some things that I'm not quite at that point of no return yet. But I was also getting really anxious and really excited and really, really looking forward to seeing what I could start to develop. And when that cousin Wendy started giving me some information, I just started digging and digging and digging. And I want to almost say I became a professional at figuring out how to get information off of obituary notices, and really starting to build a tree. And that's one of the great things with Ancestry, is I was able to start building out a family tree. And so I took information from what she gave me and started building out this tree and kind of figuring out where it was going to take me. And I think before I knew it, I had over 100 people in there. And I just kept going and going and going until I kind of came up to something that may potentially come up with a name that may sound, I don't know, familiar, feel familiar. I don't know. I just kept going, and I didn't really know where to stop. But I'm going to say that probably took me the better part of about a year, just really conversing with her, picking her brain on a lot of things, taking some information from what she was giving me and continuing to investigate. And at times you kind of feel like I can't get anymore and I'm stuck. And, that's where some of those brick walls would come up. And then I'd sit down with my cousin, and say okay, so you've done your DNA to help me out and I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. And I would share everything with her and kind of show her what I've got. And she would always be the one to, oh my God, you're so close, you're getting there, and always would encourage me.
Yeah.
And I really think if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have continued on as far as I did with her pushing me.
Yeah, I think I would imagine that would be such an overwhelming experience on so many levels, and certainly, an emotional roller coaster, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, getting close and being so far, and really not having the answers and not really knowing how close potentially you are or were. So, through this process, I understand certainly that you had your cousins' help and support. But what about your own family? Did your family know that you were going through this and that you were searching for your biological father and trying to piece the fragments of your past together in that sense?
So, unfortunately, my mother and I have an estranged relationship. At the time, we were somewhat on amicable grounds. I did talk to her about it, and she was always just like, oh, I don't know, and would fluff it off. And for whatever reason she had, and that's fine, I'm okay with it, and I've come to accept it.
Do you think she was afraid for you to find answers? Or
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what she was afraid of. I think it was probably more of her looking back, 51 years ago in her life and kind of where she was then. And I don't know. I mean, she's got her own reasons and it is what it is. I'm not judging her. But it was just something that for me, I've always wanted to know. For anyone that knows me, I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I think that I'm the kind of person that what you see with me is what you get. I'm all in all the time, and it's never anything less than that. I'm a bleeding heart for a lot of people. As I'm talking, you can tell I get very emotional.
Yeah.
And I get attached really easy. And I don't know if that's because of me looking back and thinking of, maybe there was a component of something that was missing, and me really wanting to have that. I can say when I was a kid, I've always wanted to have sisters. More than anything else, I've always wanted to have sisters. And I've always been jealous of friends that I had that had a really great relationship with sisters. And to me, that was just like amazing. I actually went as far as having 2 imaginary sisters when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And I would, when I would play, I would play with my 2 sisters. And that was just what it was. I don't think anybody really knew, but it was just something that I kind of had to myself. And it's interesting that I was 2 of them that I would play with because.
Wow. Yeah. How old were you when you started to have these imaginary sisters?
I'm going to say it was probably around 8, like around 8 or 9. My brother was about a year or so old, really became the center of attention. And I think that was for me where I really needed to have some of the attention kind of drawn to me as a kid, and started to think, well, if I had sisters, it wouldn't be that way. And I guess that's kind of what I thought on my own, but kind of where it kind of went for me.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. And, feeling sometimes that, your emotions and your feelings are not validated, through childhood, feeling like your sibling was favored, at least by one parent. That's a lot of pressure for a child to deal with. And, so let's jump back a little bit or forward a little bit. And then, did you ever imagine that through this process you might discover siblings in the pursuit of looking for your father, and perhaps maybe finding those imaginary sisters?
I think for me, that was probably the biggest piece that I was really hoping on, is not so much absolutely finding my dad was like, the cherry on the cake for me. But I think the other piece that was equally exciting for me was to find out if I potentially would have some siblings that are out there. I did have a conversation with a psychic medium, and I take it all with a grain of salt. And I know some people are like, oh my God, no. And some people are like, I'm all in. I'm a little bit of both. And I think when I had this conversation with this particular medium, she had said to me that she was having a hard time channeling anybody, that there was something that was blocking the ability for her to be able to communicate with anyone. And so she said to me that she was going to do a little bit more of a deeper meditation so that she can channel a little bit more. And we ended up rescheduling. And so about a week or so later, she came back and she said, I can't quite describe the feeling that I'm having. She goes, but it's a little bit of a different feeling that I've got right now. And she said, and she kind of paused and she said, who's the father figure in your life? And my heart just sank. And I think it was at that moment where I really started to think, I'm kicking this into high gear now. I'm all out. I got to go into this, because now that she's identified someone who is a father figure, I really wanted to know more. And so she was telling me when we had that conversation, she was saying, I get the feeling, and she goes, and the only way that I can describe it to you is like he's standing in the doorway and he's not coming in. And because he's standing in this doorway, there's nothing else coming in because he's kind of blocking anything else that's coming through. But he really wants to be present. He wants to be known that he's here, but he's not communicating with me either. And so I started asking her questions to see if maybe something would come out of it. And I said, is he my dad? And she would try and communicate that with him, and she wouldn't get anything back. And then one of the other questions was, do I have siblings? If he is my dad, do I have siblings? Like, give me something. And still nothing was coming through. And so we ended up rescheduling again because she really felt that she couldn't get anything. And then, of course, like I say, that really made me starting to think that, oh my God, there's something else out here.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that conversation that we had, I threw out a couple of names to her that of what I had heard were potentials. And she said, no, I'm not getting anything. Now, one of the gentleman who my mother had dated and who for the longest time, was told was potentially my dad, the aunt that I stayed with out for the summer, I threw his name out. And she said, I get a bit of a feeling. It's not full-fledged, but I get a bit of a feeling. She said, it's kind of like a tick, if you will, like a poke or a tick.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, I don't know what to take with that, but okay. So like I say, we ended up rescheduling, and then we ended up connecting again about a few days later. And so I had said to her that I was really looking forward to, and I said, tell me what I need to do. Do I need to help to bring some more energy to this? Like, tell me what I need to do.
You were all in,
I was all in, like,
takes.
Absolutely. And like, I think that, like I say, I think that was the piece for me that was just like, I can't stop. I need to know more because there's some additional lights that are coming for me at the end of the tunnel. And so we ended up reconnecting, and unfortunately she said, he's still here. She goes, my God, Jen, he hasn't left my side. Like, he wants to be known that he's here, but I can't get him to communicate. And I'm really, really sorry. And she ended up refunding my money. And so for me, I thought, okay, I'm not going to let this stop me. Like, I got to find somebody else. Let's find another medium. Like, I got to figure something else out and see what more I could do.
Yeah. Was that one of the brick walls right there, not getting the answers from her? And
I would say that it was.
Had something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it was. I think for me, it was, kind of having your hopes up so high, because like now, like, as soon as she said a father figure, it's like I say, my heart sank, but there was a lot of anticipation and hope that was coming through. But then as soon as she said that she couldn't get him to communicate, it's like it kind of deflated my bubble, and I was just like, oh, okay. But at the same time, knowing that I was getting close, I didn't want to give up because I felt like there had to be something there.
Yes, and we are going to talk about what that something was when we come back from this short break. You are listening to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. More with Jennifer Knight, discovering a family she didn't know she had in the pursuit of looking for her biological father. Stay with us. And welcome back to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. The Mindset Mentor is all about helping you cultivate a life you love. And in today's show, we're really focusing on listening to your intuition and never giving up. My guest, Jennifer Knight, joining me, is going through her journey, explaining to everyone on how she never gave up in looking for her biological father. She grew up without knowing who he was, and she started to get the itch to find answers to the mystery throughout the years. And so, we discussed just before the break some of the brick walls that she hit, but she never gave up. And we're going to continue the conversation and jump into what led you finally to be able to find your biological father.
Okay. So once I had the conversation with the psychic medium and really didn't get anywhere, I just kept reaching out to that one cousin that was giving me information on ancestry, really just kept building my tree. And we had a family get together at one of my aunt's house. And this was the aunt that apparently knew my dad and information about him, but kept saying it wasn't her place to say. So we had a big family get together at her house, and I had spoken to my one cousin that gave me her DNA and said, what do you think? Do you think I should go and talk to her? Do you think I should ask her just one more time? I mean, I'm not 16 anymore. I'm a grown woman. I got kids of my own. Like, let's see. And so I did. When there was a minute where she was in the kitchen by herself, I sat down and I was chatting with her, and she's a lovely woman. I love her to pieces, and not just because she was so instrumental in helping me, but she's a very genuine woman. And she was sitting in her kitchen, and she has this old wooden rocking chair. And if there's one thing that I can tell you about her that I would, if you were to find one thing that would describe her, for me, it's the rocking chair. And so she was rocking in her chair, and I was telling her the story of, most of my family knew that I had done the DNA. But I was telling her about my conversation with the medium and some of the details of what I was getting on the ancestry DNA and building my tree, and some of the names that kept popping up, and the last names that were just like forever coming up the same over and over again. And so when I started sharing some of that information with her, she said something under her breath, and I couldn't quite understand what she said. And I said, "What was that?" And she had a little bit of a tear in her eye, and she said, "Nothing, Jen." She says, I promise you, I will tell you, but I need to talk to your mother. I'm going to tell your mother first. Whether your mother wants me to tell you or not, it's okay. I'm going to tell you because I think you're old enough to know. But I will tell her, but just leave it with me. I need to get the right time to tell her. And I said, okay. And I left it at that. And I kind of felt a little like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, because I'm now feeling like the brick walls that I had hit were no longer there. Mm-hmm. And so later that night, I had received a text message just saying, from my mother, that she wasn't very pleased that I had asked my aunt for information, and that my aunt had mentioned a name to her. And my mother had said, very angry, that she was, feeling embarrassed and upset that I had done the digging that I had done. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I was in her position, would I potentially feel the same way? Maybe I might. Mm-hmm. And maybe, for whatever reason she had not to know or want to tell who he was, again, that was her decision. I'm not going to judge. But I look at it from my perspective, and I feel like there's a big void. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I needed to know. And one thing that was really important to my mother was her family and her siblings. And while I had a half brother that was her son, I still felt like if I had more, it would really make a big difference to me. And I tried to explain that to her, and she really didn't want to hear of it. I feel bad that she feels hurt, but I also feel at the same time that this is not about her, and this is about me.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's really important to really follow your intuition and what feels right to you. And many people, I think, can relate to an experience, like your mom, perhaps, and we don't really know what was going through her mind, but some people feel as though, the past is better left behind when people have made mistakes. And listen, everybody makes mistakes in life, right? Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, but some people can never move past that, and they blame themselves. So to dig that up again can cause a lot of painful feelings, and somebody's not ready to process that. Understandable then for them, but I can see where you're going with this, is that you really needed to have those answers for yourself, and listening to your intuition, I think, is so key to propel you forward when you do have situations where other people just don't understand. You have to go back, listen to yourself, and do what feels right to you in that moment, and what's helpful to you. So let's just continue, and then so now your aunt finally gave you this name?
Well, my mother did in this text message. So I was Googling his name and wasn't really coming up with anything. And then I'm going to say probably about 3 or 4 days later, my aunt phoned me, and she happened to catch me off guard. I was actually at the gas station putting gas in my car, and I ended up like skipping the pump and kind of parking off to the side and engaging in this really awesome conversation with her. And she had said to me, so I had reached out to a friend of mine, and I had initially said to your mom that this was your dad's name, and I was wrong. That's not his name. His name is actually this instead. Mm-hmm. And of course, as she's telling me, I'm Googling his name, trying to find out what I can find out. And she had said, he unfortunately died. And I figured he did, because I had this father figure that came through But she said, but before you get into anything, and as she's telling me, I'm discovering that he wasn't your typical father figure. He wasn't the quote unquote model citizen. And he had a history. And again, I wasn't going to judge. I just thought it is what it is. And maybe he has this history. He has this way of living because of what he's been through. Who knows? And so we had a long, lengthy conversation about him and, you know, what she knew about him and how he came into their life. Told me about the time when he came to Toronto because he's from the East Coast, and who he came with, and told me all about as much as she knew about him. And I was just so intrigued and so involved in this conversation with her and absorbing as much of it as I could. And being in my car parked at the gas station, I had nothing to write. I couldn't write anything. I didn't have any pen or paper, so I couldn't write anything. And I was really trying to go off of much memory as I could. And some of the names that she was throwing at me, I was like, I found like a little gas receipt or something and a pen. And I just kind of started writing some names on there so that I can kind of come back and see what I can find out. And it's interesting because some of those names that she threw at me, I can't remember to save my soul. Turns out this woman that she reached out to, who is a very near and dear friend to my aunt, turns out she's my godmother.
Wow.
So it was kind of interesting to see that this is a woman that is kind of giving a lot of information and knew a lot about my dad. Anyway, I mean, it was interesting. So I started Googling him and seeing some stuff online about him, and of course confirmed that he had died.
What did that feel like, to you know, hear and to finally know that you found your father, your biological father, and he has passed? What was that like for you?
I think that there was a big weight lifted off my shoulders, knowing that, okay, I know, but then also feeling like, but what if he's not? What if it's not him? What if it's just another name? What if it's not him? And with all honesty, I'll probably never know, because if he's dead, how can I confirm? And then my head started going to, oh my God, what if I have siblings? So then I started searching, and I had noticed that one of my sisters had put a post out that they were doing a celebration of life for my dad in his memory. And I kind of read through some of the details, and because of the way she posted it on Facebook, it was public. And so I started taking a look at some of the comments and some of the things that she had on there, and her name was obviously listed and my other sister's name was on there. And then she mentioned 2 brothers, and I was like, holy Hannah, I got 2 sisters, I got 2 more brothers. And it was really overwhelming. And I think it took me a couple of days to really process it all. It was really overwhelming. I kept searching both my sisters' names. I tried to do the Canada 411 to see if I could find phone numbers. Just really kind of going on from there. I have a group of 5 friends who are absolutely fantastic. And I say they're like my sisters from another mister, if you will. Very supportive, awesome group of ladies. And I told them, sent them, like, we have this group chat. And it's interesting because whenever we start talking with each other, if a good conversation comes up, it's like the phone explodes and it's always going off with all the responses. And so I had sent them a message and said, okay, ladies, the phone hasn't blown up in a while and I've got something to share with you. And I left it at that, and nobody waited a couple minutes. And then all of these responses are like, what's going on?
Tell us.
So I wrote, so ... I found my dad. Well, my phone blew up. It was just like messages after messages going off. It was pretty awesome how supportive they were, wanting to know as much as they could. And were saying to me, so when's the trip? Like, where are we going? What are we doing? Like, and they were all in, as equally as I was. They were all in and wanting to know as much as they could. And let's go on a road trip. Let's find out what we can. And when I told them that I had these sisters and potentially 2 brothers, they were really excited for me and so incredibly supportive.
Wow. Okay. I love this story. We're going to hear more about this. We're going to take a short little break, and then we're going to delve into the experience of now meeting her siblings that she didn't know existed, in the pursuit of looking for her biological father. And unfortunately, discovering that he had passed, she did have some good news to see that there's an extension of her biological father with his children. So stay with us. We're going to be right back here on Sauga 960 AM. You're listening to The Mindset Mentor. And welcome back to The Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. We are working out your mindset. Your mindset is like a muscle that needs to be strengthened and conditioned. You know, we all work out our biceps, our triceps, our abs, and we know the importance of that. But the importance of working out your mindset is just invaluable. And today we're really focusing on following your intuition and never giving up. And it is a mindset to continue moving forward when you're met with resistance and you're constantly, discovering challenges. And I think if we look at challenges as a gift and a learning experience, we can really gain so much from those not so wonderful moments, so to speak, because we've all had them. We've all had many challenges in life. And my guest joining me on today's show is Jennifer Knight. She was determined to find her biological father. She grew up not knowing who he was. Many years, decades later, she was able to find him, found out that he had unfortunately passed away before she had a chance to meet him. But she discovered through her determination and through her persistence that she had siblings, 4 half siblings. So we're going to delve and jump back into the conversation with Jennifer. And let's talk about now that phone call. You called up potentially a sibling, and what was that like?
So it was really nerve-wracking, I gotta say. I managed to find one of my sister's contact information online and thought that I was just going to give it a try. You never know, and I did. And so I called, and she answered the phone, and of course, my heart started pumping a little bit quicker. My palms were sweating. And so I just jumped right in and said, "Hi, my name is Jen, and I think I'm your sister." And of course, there was dead silence on the other end of the phone.
Whoa.
And she says, "Okay." And I said, "So if you can just kind of bear with me for a minute, let me tell you what I know, and we'll see what we can find out." And so I started reciting back to her the story that my aunt had shared with me about how my dad had come to Toronto, and it was around this time, and this is who he came with, and this is kind of what I know, and really went from there. And thank God she was so receptive and so open to it. And her comment to me was, "Jen, I got to tell you, knowing Dad the way he was, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised to hear that you're calling me and telling me that you're my sister. But I'm speechless." We were probably on the phone, I'm going to say, about an hour and 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And just really having a great conversation. And I was telling her as much as I knew, because I felt like I really needed to validate a lot of that for her, rather than just being some crazy woman calling her and saying, "I think I'm your sister." I really wanted to give her as much information as I could. And so I did, and I gave her, we ended up becoming friends on Facebook so that she could, and I told her, I said, "Creep, go ahead, take a look and see what you can see." And so we did, we continued, I gave her, she obviously had my phone number because I had, had call display on her phone, but I obviously had hers. And she said, I just need to digest this. And I'm like, absolutely. I totally get it. And I think if somebody had called me out of the blue, being in your shoes, I probably would be blown away and really wouldn't know what to say. And so she called me back a couple of days later, and she said, "So I spoke to my mom, and she's confirmed, Dad was in Ontario that time, and yeah, that was one of his friends, and she's not surprised, and it was just kind of went from there. And she said to me, she goes, I got to tell you, she said, I looked at pictures of you on Facebook, and oh my God, you and our other sister are almost identical. You're a brunette
Wow.
version of her being blonde.
Wow. Okay. So that's validation right there enough, I think, to say, all right, we're on the right track here.
Yeah, I think so. So then she started telling me about my brothers or our brothers, and looking at pictures of my brothers, I could totally see my son.
Mm.
And it floored me at how I could all of a sudden start seeing some of these resemblances coming through. It took my other sister, the younger one, a little bit longer to come around, and that was fine. She just needed to kind of accept it, digest it all. But in the meantime, my sister that I had reached out to was telling me that she was actually coming to Ontario for a dance recital for her daughter. And so I had told my girlfriends, the 5 fabulous ladies, and they're like, okay, we're going on a road trip. And that was it. Like, there was no turning back. So they came with me. We went out to Ottawa, and I met my sister for the first time, and they were there.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I can imagine the rush of emotion and the varying, levels of everything that's happening. So what was that like for you? So the moment you saw her, did you recognize her? Did you feel like, that you had this bond and you looked similar, or did you feel like you literally were meeting a stranger?
I wasn't sure what to expect because I've obviously never met her, and I'm just kind of going off pictures. It was really emotional for me leading up to that. A ton of tears.
Yeah.
But when I saw her walking by, I knew immediately it was her. Cried my eyes out, and it was awesome. It was really, really awesome. She's so genuine, and she's just so loving, and she's just so accepting of everything. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was really awesome.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Having spent a childhood not knowing who your biological father was, feeling like an outsider, at times because your half brother was favored, by one parent at least. I would imagine that would bring up a lot of emotions from the past, not only in that moment. So I think it's such a freeing, I would imagine it's a very cathartic experience to be able to now process some of those emotions that may have been unprocessed for quite some time.
Absolutely. It was a euphoric moment for me, if anything. We ended up having breakfast together, her and I and her daughter, my niece. And it was pretty awesome. I mean, really kind of getting to know them a little bit as much as we could. And just kind of taking the conversation from there. It was awesome. I left that weekend feeling so amazing. And interestingly enough, I don't know how many people believe in little antidotes, if you will, but the end of that weekend, I was cleaning the car out and I found a dime in the car. And I've heard stories where finding dimes are things that loved ones have left behind. And I really took that as my dad was with me on that journey to meet my sister.
Beautiful, absolutely. And so we don't have too much time, so I want to talk about the other siblings. Have you had a chance to meet your brothers as well?
I have. So I did end up going out to New Brunswick and meeting my other sister. When they met me at the airport, it was awesome. My little niece came running up to me as if she hasn't seen me in so long when she's never met me, and it was just awesome. It was just amazing. They ended up spending the weekend taking me to all the places that our dad loved to go to. And they ended up giving me a really beautiful gift. I have a necklace that I wear every day, and inside the necklace has my dad's ashes. So I have a piece of him with me every day.
Even though you never had a chance to meet him, you've got him with you. So such a
all the time.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. So what last bit of advice can you give someone who may find themselves in a similar situation or just a life challenging moment and they kind of have a tendency to want to give up because things are getting a little bit tough? What kind of advice can you give them?
Don't give up. Go with your gut. If your gut is telling you that there's something there for you, don't give up. It's so worth it in the end. It's been absolutely amazing for me. I've met both my sisters, one of my brothers. I've met both of my sisters and my brother's moms. I have one more brother to meet. He's out in Vancouver, and it's going to happen as soon as this COVID stuff is over. But I feel so blessed. And I'm so glad that I pursued and I didn't give up. And I will say, don't give up. You really, really can't. It's so worth it
Yes.
in the end.
I couldn't agree with you more. Never give up. You can be, do, have, and achieve anything you want when you stay determined and you stay true to your purpose and listen to your intuition and follow that internal guidance. Jennifer, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing such a personal story and being vulnerable enough to take us through your journey, what you went through, what that felt like, and offering other people hope as well who, again, may be going through something similar. I think it's always, so great to be able to learn from others. So thank you for sharing your story in the hopes of helping others as well.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that is a wrap for this show today. Make sure you tune in next Saturday at 11 a.m. for more of the Mindset Mentor, where we help to condition and strengthen your mindset. And remember to never give up because it is possible for you. One of the things that we often say to ourselves is that, well, it's not for me. I can't do it. I can't achieve it. That's for other people. Absolutely not. You can do, have, and achieve and be anything that you desire.